Welcome to Encounter Wargaming. I'm Jay, and today we're going to be taking the ruins that we built on last week's video and painting them up and making them look sweet. So thanks for joining us for the second half of our quick and easy 40k ruined building videos. Basically last week, if you guys checked it out, we built a ruined building from scratch, which was wicked fun, super easy to do. I wanted to show you guys just how simple it really is to make some awesome terrain. So today we're gonna finish it off by painting it right from the ground up, adding some cool details and some nice little effects to it to make it look sweet with very little effort. So we're gonna take the foam core building that you guys saw in last week's video and make it look like this awesomeness. Alright, so here's our building from last week. So I've started by basically painting the entire guy. As you saw him last week, it was just sand and foam core. I've painted the entire piece, Rust-Oleum Painter's Touch Satin Espresso paint. Basically, normally I would spray paint my terrain pieces with this color. I like it as a good base. It's basically your burnt umber. But you can use any burnt umber. I like to buy big cans like this. Well, this is actually the small can if you look at it from the hardware store. But I like to buy big cans like this for terrain because this was like 10 bucks for this can, 10 Canadian dollars. And I've used a lot of it on various terrain pieces and I barely scratched it with this. So anyway, we got a good basically burnt umber base for our entire terrain piece. And I made sure to get lots of it on there, made sure to pay attention around the corners, make sure there was no globs or runs or anything, but I made sure to get in all the battle damage with this color, make sure every single spot on this piece is covered with this. And because it's rust paint, it will protect it even more. I mean, this thing is already covered in PVA glue and sand and all that stuff. But the rust paint will really help the sand stay on, and it will really seal everything in and add a nice protective coat. So the next stage, we actually get to start painting this now. So the first step we're going to take on this piece is we're going to paint all of the concrete gray. So here I've got a bottle of the Liquitex Basics Neutral Gray. And we're basically just going to dry brush this on. So I have here a piece of foil to use as a palette and a couple of pieces of paper towel. I've also brought out a couple of different brushes. So for most of the building, I'm going to use my really big wide brush here because it has very soft bristles, but at the same time, if I get it dry enough, it won't create as many brush streaks because it's more like, I don't know, it feels almost more like a makeup brush or something, right? And then this one is more like a straw type material, but more importantly than that, it's very thin as opposed to this one, which is wide no matter what angle you look at it. So this one's going to give me a little more control for those areas where I need a little more control, and this one's just going to be that overall sort of dry brush, make sure everything's really faded sort of look. I've got a couple of different pieces of paper towel here, and the reason I do that, especially on terrain pieces, is because I want to make sure that it's really, really dry. And when we say dry brush, all that means is you're going to take a little bit of paint on your brush and just brush it out on the paper towel until it's dry. Like literally, that's why I use the second one, because now I can see exactly how strong the dry brush is. And I'm just brushing it out, so it just really creates that sort of faded powder effect. So that's all there is to it really, you just experiment with that. So let's go ahead and do it.
Laugh at the debris of our stupid lives. 1, 2, 3, 4. Smoking, smoldering, blowing hot ash out the door. Like 1,000 fire wrecks of 1,000 fire wrecks before. Just broke down, torn down, useless old clown. Finally found himself a new way out of town. Well, let the missiles misfire, mutate, it's so meaningless. Laugh at the debris of our stupid lives. 1, 2, 3, 4.
gray is done, the next color we're going to do is we're going to throw a lighter in-between sort of shade of brown on the sand. And for that, I'm going to use a Liquitex yellow oxide. That's the one I'm using today. That's the one I've used in most of our past terrain videos, and so I'm trying to keep things uniform here so that everything blends together nicely. So, same situation, it's just this time I'm going to use just my smaller brush, my skinnier brush, because that way I want to make sure I don't get too much onto the building itself. I want to make sure that, you know, if a little bit gets on, it's okay. And the reason we did the gray first was so that any little bits of the gray that we've kind of already gotten onto the sand are going to be pretty much covered up by this. We're going to do not a super heavy dry brush, but a heavy enough dry brush on top of the burnt umber sand. Excuse me. That it gives it a nice in-between shade between our final dry brush that we're going to do and the dark burnt umber that we want to leave in the shade and in the crevices. So, more or less, normally I would go around and touch up the burnt umber a little bit if you've gotten too much of the gray, but I think I haven't gotten a whole lot of it on there. And we're also going to be adding some foliage and grass and vines and things to this piece, so we're going to be able to cover some of the little errors like that. But for the most part, if we do a heavy enough dry brush with this oxide, then it should cover whatever mistakes we've made with the gray. Now that we've got our base colors painted, basically dry brushed on top of our burnt umber espresso color, we're going to finish the entire piece off. This is all it takes to paint this entire terrain piece. We're going to finish it off with the Unbleached Titanium. Basically this is like a bleached bone or your shop T-bone. Again, I've used this in past tutorials and we're continue on using the same colors because just for continuity's sake. And I'm going to take my big wide brush again, and this time I'm going to make sure that it is really dry because I want to make sure that I get a really light dry brush on this. I don't want it to be too heavy because I don't want to kill the base colors. But I did a relatively heavy dry brush of the original colors, and then we want to do like a super light dry brush of this color. So I'm more or less going to make sure that there is very little paint in my brush, if barely any at all, on this final paper towel here. And this is just going to create sort of that last little light highlight. Just kind of adds a little white to all the edges. As you can see there, the top there is much brighter and much more bang than the rest of it. So I'm going to go over the entire piece, even the dirt. We're going to do all of it with this color. So let's just go at it.
Just like that show you like on HBO. And if we're leaving just like that show you like on HBO. And if we're leaving tonight, I'll be right behind. Oh no.
And that's that. That is our entire terrain piece painted. So now that we've painted our piece, just as a couple of finishing touches, I just want to add some foliage to this, just to give it another level of detail. So I've got here 2 different colors of static grass. If you guys have seen my past terrain videos, I like to use multiple colors of static grass. This time I've only got access really to these 2, so I've got like kind of a light green and a more vibrant green. Normally I do, you know, 2 or 3 different shades. It just creates a little more realism because, of course, an area of grass is not going to be all the same color. There's going to be patches that are lighter, patches that are darker, you know, patches that have dyed and what have you. So I'm just going to take my PVA glue, put a bunch on my palette here, nothing complicated, and I'm just going to go around the base of this terrain piece, and anywhere that I think I've done my dry brush too heavy or it's too dark, or there are areas like on the edges here where I've done, you know, I've gotten too much of that bone color, I'm just going to cover up those areas and use this as kind of a way to hide a lot of my mistakes.
Worry about the words, I worry till my brain explodes. Like it really fucking matters what I have to say. Like it matters how the story goes. All the kids will eat the candy anyway. They're killing the muse.
Okay, just a quick little tip here. I've got that one side done, and of course I'm going to go around and do the rest of the base of this terrain piece, but I just want to show you guys what I'm doing, sort of explain it in a little more detail. Now that I've got my patches of glue on there, I'm just going to take my lighter green and just sprinkle it in small areas. Not cover the entirety of the glue, just sort of in small patches like that. Bam. Just like that. And then I'm going to take my more vibrant green and cover the rest of it with that. This way I get patches of the lighter one in certain areas, and then the majority of it is going to be the more vibrant green. And by putting the one I want in lesser volume first, it ensures that it sticks to the glue first, and any other areas of the glue are simply covered by the remaining color. Now, of course, I'm putting this on in large amounts, so I'm going to have to get a piece of paper afterwards and dump this out onto the paper, same way I did the sand in the first half of this video, the one you saw last week, just to not waste this stuff, because static grass ain't cheap. I mean, it's not super expensive either, but it ain't cheap. Cool, there's that. So now I've got my piece of paper, and I'm just gonna sort of tap it like this. Just try to catch whatever didn't stick to the glue on the paper. Just tapping the bottom to make sure that it all falls off, anything that's loose, onto the paper so I don't waste it. Just like that. And then I'm just gonna take this, got a nice fold in the center there just so it all funnels towards the middle, and dump it right back into my grass. So now I'm going to go around and I'm going to do the rest of this piece.
I don't dance, but I'll try for you. I see you laughing at my moves. Well, I had rhythm just on my shoes. I tried once in high school. I tried once in high school. No one showed me what to do. Well, I had rhythm just on the shoe. You didn't
moss on there. It's looking pretty sweet. And I want to just add a final detail. I think I actually want to have vines growing up the side of this building because it's pretty naked right now. And in fact, you can kind of see some of my pencil lines still where I drew that grid. Just on this piece, not so much on this side. But this will allow me to cover some of that, whereas at the same time making it look like this building is completely grown over, because we want this to be, I want to bring a lot of life into this piece. I don't want it to just be a dead building, right? So I have here some moss. Now, this actually, I purchased this at the Dollarama. It actually came in a bag. I put it in this square container, which used to be for static grass, just to sort of make it easy for me to use. And I don't know, it was like $1.25 for like a massive bag of this stuff, and it is actual moss, which is pretty cool. And it looks great as vines. And much like the static grass, we're just going to take our palette and our PVA glue. Not super complicated. And I'm going to take my brush and just kind of paint on the white glue where I want the vines to be. So I'm just going to kind of, like on this side, like I was saying, I want to cover a lot of these pencil lines. So I'm just going to do this along the pencil line, along the side of the window, maybe branch it off a bit and have it sort of come up the side of this post corner thing that I've done here. And then I'm just going to take the moss, and what you can do is just kind of rip it apart into pieces, and that'll give you these long sort of strands. And I'm just going to take these, sort of stretch them out as far as possible, and just stick them on to the white glue. Now you will find this will be very tedious. It will want to fall off on you a little bit and bunch up a little bit. Just be patient with it. As you can see there, I'm just kind of slowly putting piece by piece on here, and then afterwards I'll show you how to protect it. And that's more or less what I'm going for. So I'm just going to go around and do that.
Do you believe in fate? Oh, soulmates, 'cause I give thanks to the taxi that brought you here. No, I wouldn't trade laughter for gold. No, isn't it priceless? Everything works out. Isn't it perfect? Everything works out. Oh. And I'm jumping the gun.
There we go. Basically, I would just say take your time with this stuff. It is super finicky. I don't know if you guys noticed, but as I was putting it on, a couple of them fell off. They wanted to stick to my fingers instead of to the piece. It's really kind of meticulous and a pain in the butt sometimes, but right now I've got basically the vines everywhere I want them. Here, I'm just going to pick those couple of pieces that fell off there. And I've got them basically where I want them, and right now I am just holding them on with the white glue that I put on the actual like concrete areas itself. I want to let that dry now so that what of the moss has stuck to that white glue will stay stuck, and then I'm going to put a layer of white glue and water on top of it in order to seal them all in. But we want to let this layer dry first, so that way when we go to put that next layer on, we don't start peeling it all off as we're brushing it on. So that's it for now. I'm gonna let that dry for a few hours and then we'll come back to it. Alright, so our initial vines are pretty much dry at this point, and I'm just gonna show you for a final step. We're just gonna show you how to seal in these so that they don't come off in the future, because right now they're still a little spongy. There is a chance that if anyone pulls it or hits it, that it is gonna come off. So I'm just gonna seal it in with some white glue and water. Just basically, just real simple. I've got a little bit of water here in a styrofoam cup. I've got my PVA glue, And I'm basically just going to put as much glue as I have water. That's probably good there. Sort of a 50-50 mix. And just stir it up real good, and for that I'm just going to use the back of my paintbrush here. Make sure to mix it in real good. Sometimes the PVA glue doesn't quite take the water, but for the most part it should be pretty good. And I actually want it to be really watery because we don't want it to dry and be all shiny and stuff, because it'll just look funny. But we do want it to be thick enough that it will seal in the vines. Ooh. I think I actually might add a little bit of glue to that because it looks a little too watery for me. So for this, all I'm gonna do, I'm not gonna like paint, I don't wanna like drag against the vines, because as you saw there, it's kind of floppy, it's gonna come off a little bit. What I wanna use this to do is basically stick it to the concrete wall. So at this point, it is held on in places by the initial white glue that I put on the concrete, but with this stuff I want to kind of seal it in. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start at the top and work my way down, just because it does have a tendency to run down the piece. But I want to sort of, rather than paint it on, I want to kind of stab the vines with it. And what that'll do is it'll make sure that it soaks in, but it'll also make sure that any areas that are not stuck sort of get pushed onto the wall and stick on better, like that. Just kind of stabbing it. If it runs down a bit, that's okay. Like I say, PVA glue does dry relatively clear. It's just I wanted to make sure that it wasn't too much glue in the water, because it does have a tendency to go shiny sometimes, and we don't really want a gloss finish or anything on this. It is a terrain piece, so we want it to look as natural as possible. But what this will do is the water will basically soak into the moss and harden it up, because when the glue dries, it'll dry very hard, almost as hard as plastic. And this just ensures that these do not fall off in the future, because we want this terrain piece to be usable, right guys? We want to be able to beat the crap out of this, throw models all over it, chuck it around the table a little bit. I mean, obviously we don't want to be too rough with it, but at the same time we want it to be durable enough that it can stand up to the wear and tear of standard play. So I'm just going to go around and soak all this, I almost called it algae, soak all this moss in PVA glue.
I'll make it worth your time. Will you make it worth of mine? Oh, honey, will you make it worth mine, yeah? Upon first impression, blew me away. Now second impression, and I want you to stay. Man, I'm letting you know. Other projects are on hold. Whoa, whoa. Oh, yeah.
I got all all of them. So basically now I'm just going to go around with a paper towel. I'm sure you guys saw me doing that as I was painting on the glue. Just going to go around with a paper towel and soak up any areas where the glue has pooled too much on the ground and stuff. Because if I just leave those pools, like I say, not only will you get like this weird little clear spot, you might even get a foggy little white spot. So you want to be very careful not to get large pools of the white glue, but for the most part, I think I'm pretty good. And then this guy basically will just make sure that the vines stay on. The areas that are actually not touching the walls and aren't stuck to the walls will at the very least be hard to the touch, so that they're less likely to flake off and stuff in the future. And this just ensures the durability of it. I mean, it is actual real-life moss, so, you know, it's very fragile. It can flake off, and it might even deteriorate in the future. I don't think it will, because I've had this moss for like, I don't know, a year, maybe 2 now, and it hasn't decomposed at all. I think it's because when I bought it, it was already dried, probably cured, like you would, you know, dry any other plant or flower. Which makes it less likely to decay in the future. So now that I've soaked it though, the glue will just ensure that it hardens. Like I say, it'll almost be as hard as plastic. And that just makes sure that our terrain piece will last the long haul. So there she is. Basically, I'm just gonna let all this glue dry now, and that'll be basically it to finish this terrain piece. So take a good look, guys. That is the fruits of our labor. I think it turned out pretty damn good. Yeah, so I hope you enjoyed that. So there's our building, our sweet little 40K ruin. I think it looks wicked awesome. And it really wasn't that difficult to do. If you guys checked out last week's video and this week's video, I'm sorry I had to divide it into 2, but even though it was quick and easy, it would have been just way too long to do it all as one video. So thanks for following along for the last couple of weeks. I had a great time building it. I hope you guys had a great time watching me build it, and I hope it gives you ideas to build some awesome terrain for your own tables. So if you enjoy our terrain videos, if you enjoy our battle reports and all that other stuff, please hit the subscribe button. We really appreciate everyone who hits the subscribe button. Also hit that little bell notification so you will be notified every time one of our videos come out, because we are constantly releasing battle reports. We constantly have hobby tips, hobby tutorials. We do narrative campaigns for multiple game systems. As well, I'm constantly making terrain. I love making terrain, so if you guys like these terrain videos, please keep checking out our channel, because there will be more terrain videos in the future. And on top of that, if you also really want to contribute to what we do here, as opposed to just subscribing, please go in the description below. We have a link there to our Patreon campaign for as little as $1 a video, or even hell, even $1 a month if you really want to. You can help us do what we do here, help us get new materials and stuff for the terrain, help us upgrade our equipment as it dies and stuff like that. In return for your very small contribution, you guys get these Tuesday and Thursday videos early. As well, there are extra perks to being a patron. If you become a $2 patron and you're with us for a year, we give you free swag and all kinds of stuff like that. We're constantly releasing small videos where we show you guys our hobby studios, so you get kind of a behind the scenes. As well, there are a whole bunch more other perks. That's just a taste of what being a patron gets you for like $1 a month. It's crazy, right? So, if you like Encounter Wargaming, go down, check out that link, check out our Patreon page. All the perks are listed there, and you can get more out of your Encounter Wargaming experience. But otherwise, we will see you at our next encounter.
Like a monkey in a